Good morning, everybody. Welcome into another edition of the Sac City Podcast. I'm your host, the one and only Vinny Milani, joined as always by my best friend in the whole entire world, Aaron the Mukesiah Mukes. Below us, we have your boy, the reigning, the defending, the undisputed, not so heavyweight valedictorian of the show for one more day. He is AJ Johnson. It is a beautiful June 30th morning here in the city on Good Morning Sac City. Episode 49 is about to kick off. We are breaking down the NFC North and their fantasy outlooks today. Gentlemen, how goes it? AJ, I'll start with you.
It goes well. Just another back end of the week. Looking towards the weekend. Happier than I will be on Monday. Sadder than I will be on Wednesday. But all in all, pretty good. Football is closer. It's about time for me to start getting ready for my fantasy league to open up, which means just another mountain of work to start focusing on. But hey, it's fantasy football work, so I'll find my glory in it. I'll find my happiness, my happy place.
73 days and counting, boys. 73 days and
be here before we know it.
Yep, I'm excited for it. I'm stoked for another one. We laid the foundation of a great football season last year for us in fantasy and watching it for our show, everything. This year we go to a whole nother level. I'm excited for it. Aaron, how are you over there what are we calling it now? Dateline
the Michelangelo pose, the David like he's just been all just sitting like this for the first 3 minutes of the show.
Well, I mean, you used all my good juice on my internet vibe. Now I'm disconnecting.
Oh.
I thought that was on purpose. I was like, this man just on camera flexing, trying to look cute for the peoples. Because for us, it looks like you're blinking in real time.
No, I had very good connection, and then you talked so much that my connection went out. So when it was my turn to talk, I had nothing because my connection went out.
I don't normally get good connection. I got to take advantage of it.
Oh, man. Nothing like live television, folks. Nothing like live television. We've got a great show ahead of us, though. We're going to be diving in to the NFC North, and you know what? Let's get into some of our NFC North talk here. We'll start off with that, and then we'll get into our morning headlines, and then we'll move on from there. I'm really dying to know about this, and you guys can laugh at me all you want because we've now done 2 shows where I talk about tight ends way more than I probably should. But the NFC North seems like a division, at least for fantasy, where the tight ends, the names are a little bit more interesting because you have a lot more question marks surrounding them. You have a TJ Hawkinson where there's question marks around him. Obviously, he's on the higher end of the spectrum, but then you have guys like Cole Kmet, Irv Smith Jr., all battling for spots in maybe the top 12. So, AJ, I'll start off with you. How would you rank the top 4 tight ends in this division of Big Bob Tonyan, Irv Smith Jr., TJ Hawkinson, and Cole Kmet?
Basically the opposite of how you just listed it. Kind of here. So give me TJ Hawkinson first. I'm going to take Cole Kmet second. I'm going to take Robert Tonyan third, and I'm going to take Irv Smith Jr. fourth. And the way I kind of look at this is going with Hawkinson, 101 targets in 2020, and last year he was on pace for 125 before he missed the last 5 games of the season due to injury and whatnot. Cole Kmet, kind of the same thought process, 60 catches, 612 yards. But going into this year, after Darnell Mooney, I mean, who are you really thinking about in that offense? We really liked what Cole Kmet was doing last season. He just got a little unlucky, couldn't really find the end zone, as many weren't in that offense due to a head coach who will not be named. Think about Robert Tonyan next, and it's kind of the same thought process there as well. The opportunity that I think is going to be there because he has the trust of Aaron Rodgers. And last year he only played 8 games, only had 5 or on pace for 5 touchdowns when it was done. But after Christian Watson, after Alan Lazard, you think about some of those other guys that may fit in there. But Robert Tonyan, if he's healthy and ready to go, which they say he's ahead of schedule, I think he's going to have the trust of Aaron Rodgers. And then Irv Smith, again, is another one coming off injury all season long, didn't play last year, and he's just young. So we're hoping and waiting to see what he can do. We hear he's talented, but we just haven't seen it yet. So I do, starting today, that's what that list looks like, but it's very possible, this can shuffle. Irv Smith has an opportunity. While we wait on Aaron to get back, I'll kind of finish this out. But my thought process on Irv, the other reason he's fourth, because that offense just hasn't really supported a tight end in multiple years. The last time a good tight end was in Minnesota was in 2018. It was Kyle Rudolph with 64 catches for 634 yards and 4 touchdowns, and that's it.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an explosive outside offense unless Kevin O'Connell decides to do something different.
I feel like we've been waiting on Irv Smith Jr. to be that guy. Like, I don't know if Irv Smith went to Alabama, right? That's I'm remembering this correctly. He was an Alabama guy. It's kind of funny. Like it's very similar to the OJ Howard thing. We've just been waiting and waiting for them to be relevant in the NFL, and maybe OJ Howard's a little bit more far away than we wanted him to be. But Irv Smith Jr. now he gets a little bit more. The potential is there for Irv Smith Jr. And I've been hearing a lot of talk about him possibly being a breakout candidate for the season under the new offense of Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. Aaron, you hopefully heard. Did you hear what AJ's rankings were, and are you on board with it, or because it was Hawkinson, Kmet, Big Bob, and Irv Smith?
I agree. I'm not sure how much you guys are going to get from me. This connection is just really, really bad right now. It's bad, but I agree.
Okay.
It's all that in real time, if that helps, if you want to try to go in anymore.
Yeah, I'd like to get your thoughts, Aaron, if you can hold on, if you can push through it here. Your thoughts on Irv Smith Jr., because obviously last on the rankings for both of you, but the breakout potential is there, is it not?
I love Irv Smith. I like the situation he's in with no real competition in Minnesota. You're talking about a guy who started to come on even when Kyle Rudolph was there before he left. He just wasn't used a whole lot. He could easily end up being best out of the group of 4. So he's one of my sleeper tight ends. I really like what he's capable
of. Okay. So the best out of the 4 tight ends here. That's the type of potential we're talking about with Irv Smith, though. Like that is what the ceiling of Irv Smith as being the best, at least in the NFC North. And if you're the best in the NFC North, we talked about last night or yesterday morning that it's literally like, or this morning, I should say. Yesterday morning, that
one of them days. One of them days.
They're all rolling together at this point. We talked about it though, about how like the tight end position is. You don't have to be phenomenal to be a top 5, top 8 tight end in fantasy football. You don't. It's such there's that gap. We talk about it's Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Darren Wall, and then everybody else. And TJ Hawkinson has been hot and cold in that, and you don't know if he can be that guy consistently. We're going to talk about him in a little bit when we talk about the Lions fantasy outlook. But Irv Smith Jr., I think that just goes to show that how wide open the tight end position is, and also the potential that Irv Smith Jr. possesses. Cole Kmet, anybody? Cole Kmet, anybody is on?
I'm interested, man. I'm interested to see what happens because everyone always talks about how Darnell Mooney had a great season last year and he should do it again this year because there's no receivers to talk about. They keep saying there's no receivers, and Byron Pringle may have a good game, but there's no receivers. But no one ever says, all right, so then the passes are going to go to Cole Kmet after Darnell Mooney. They go straight to the run game, which is understandable. David Montgomery should get a lot of work. But if you recall, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this later, I expect the defenses to expect David Montgomery to get a lot of work. And Cole Kmet is a big body and a security blanket for a young quarterback. So I'm intrigued to see if he can get a little luckier this year, fall into the end zone a couple more times, and maybe get a couple more touches than he did last season. So I can't say, oh, this is his year, because we are going to a completely different offense, a completely different mindset than they had last year in that atrocious Nagy system. And so I can't just go right for it, but I'm intrigued to see what's possible for Cole Kmet. I like the way now, like really talking about it, the way you said, there's a lot of question marks, but there's also just a lot of potential with the tight ends in this NFC North division.
Yeah, agreed. Aaron, any last words before we move on?
No, we've spent too much time on tight ends.
Great. We're going to go into the our NFC North talk, because there really isn't many morning headlines right now to discuss, unless one of you guys wants to jump into one. But I don't think, I didn't see anything when I was getting the show ready and all that good stuff. So we're going to get into our NFC North fantasy outlooks. But before we do that, AJ, please pay the bills.
Good morning, Sac City. Welcome in another great episode back to back. And guess what? Tomorrow we're going to do it again. And if you want to know how to make sure you are sitting right in front of your viewership to make that happen, head right over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Sac City Pod. Make sure you hit those follows, those likes, and those comments, them Cole comments once you get there. At Sac City Pod, ladies and gentlemen, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We appreciate the love, especially that heart you hit. Make sure you use that hashtag GMSC. Good morning, Sac City. Population, how many, Vinny?
Infinite.
One more. One more, Vinny. It's cool. We'll get there. We're working on it.
Got it. One more. Population uno mas. Population uno mas.
Oh, great
in
movie.
The city. We're bilingual here in the city. We're bilingual. All right, let's get things rolling here. Aaron's got some good connection from what it looks like to start things off. So I'm going to go to him first on this one so that we can hopefully capitalize on his greatness. Packers kick things off in our fantasy outlook. Aaron, obvious the biggest chatter with the Green Bay Packers is the loss of Davante Adams. We covered the Raiders on last show. Now we talk about his former team in the Packers. What does Aaron Rodgers' fantasy season look like without a Davante Adams there?
Looks like every other fantasy season, in my opinion. Look, he's going to have to obviously find a new number one target, but Aaron Rodgers is going to produce. I think the one thing you might see is this might be more of the Aaron Rodgers we saw from 2 years ago, which I believe it was 2 years ago, where we see a lot more work in the run game, a lot of play action. He's not throwing the ball as much, but he's going to always be super efficient, right? It's Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. In the red zone, he likes to get his numbers, those 1 yard touchdowns that he should just turn around and hand off to Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon. He likes to get those touchdowns for his stats, and he turns around and he throws it instead. So I think the numbers will be there, but you might see the amount of volume go down a little bit. He's probably pushing a back-end quarterback one just because of the situation, everything. He's older. And he doesn't obviously have Davante Adams, but when you're drafting Aaron Rodgers, you're understanding, hey, I'm still getting a quarterback one. My turnovers are going to be really low, and I have a guy that I can count on week in and week out.
Yeah, right now Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback 10 off the board going in with the 77th overall pick in drafts. So I think that's a fair spot for him. And under the Matt LaFleur system in Green Bay, Rodgers with Davante Adams for fantasy averages 23 points since Matt LaFleur took over, and without him, Packers are 7-0 without Davante Adams, and Aaron Rodgers averages 27 fantasy points per game without Davante Adams. And this is not saying to knock on Davante Adams, but this is giving people a little bit more comfort, hopefully, to still go out and trust the back-to-back MVP, go out and trust your Aaron Rodgers, especially at his ADP right now, which is still fair. It is still fine. AJ, Aaron mentioned this with whatever wide receiver Aaron Rodgers ends up enjoying and going to the most this season. We put to rest yesterday the Chiefs wide receivers and ranking them for Patrick Mahomes without Tyreek Hill. Let's do it with the Packers now without Davante Adams. Rank the fantasy wide receivers in Green Bay.
You know, the other interesting part about that is we talked about how Mahomes wants to spread the ball around this season, possibly. I think that's what you're going to see a lot from Green Bay as well. When I went here to do these rankings, I was tempted at first to put Christian Watson up top. You know, the talent that he has, the explosiveness that we had. But really thinking about it and looking at what Allen Lazard did last year, not astronomical numbers, but efficient numbers. I put him at number 1. Last year, 60 targets, 40 receptions, and 8 touchdowns. It's a touchdown per 5 receptions. Like, I'll take that efficiency. So he has the trust of Aaron Rodgers. And I think to start the season, Allen Lazard is going to come on very strong. So I got him at number 1. I am going to put Christian Watson at number 2. In college, though it was a small school, he showed great numbers. I mean, he averaged 20.4 yards per catch at North Dakota State, and they were a run-heavy team. So when they did strike, they strike hot. But not only is he a deep threat, he's also really good at the slants. He's also really good at contested catches, which can gain the trust of a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, who wants to give the opportunity to the receiver to win the ball. After that, I went with the Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers type thing, just to kind of slide in there. And that Amari Rodgers is just like, hey, it's your second year. Either show up or we know that someone else is going to be there. And yeah, I kind of did it for you too. When it comes to Randall Cobb, I mean, that's Aaron Rodgers' guy. They're restructuring contracts to keep him there. But, you know, he's going to be 32, a year older, and is, you know, I'm not going to say a year slower. Who knows? Maybe he and Aaron Rodgers will do the fine wine season type thing. But so that's kind of those are the only ones I really find fantasy relevant. I want to say this about Sammy Watkins because people are probably asking, which you really shouldn't be. I do not think Sammy Watkins is going to be a guy that you want to use this season at all. Maybe watch him on the waivers and see what happens. But we're talking about a guy in the last 3 years has regressed in targets, regressed in yards, regressed in targets, despite being with 3 of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So, I mean, last year, 27 receptions, 394 yards, 1 touchdown, good for wide receiver 104. That's not something that I'm like, oh, he's with Aaron Rodgers now. I can trust Sammy Watkins again. Couldn't do it with Lamar. Couldn't do it with Pat Mahomes. I don't think Aaron Rodgers will be the difference, and that's not a knock against Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and his ADP right now, Sammy Watkins, he's not being drafted. He's not draftable right now, according to average ADP. Average ADP. What a redundant statement that was.
average draft.
Yeah, exactly. But really though, and you listed it out, and that's actually the exact order that the ADPs are kind of going. Really, it's Allen Lazard is going as the wide receiver 50, and then Christian Watson is going as a wide receiver 53. So it's really close, but Allen Lazard has that edge because of the fact that he's been there with Aaron Rodgers. He was second in the on the Packers last season in yards for receiving behind, obviously, Davante Adams. But I think this is one of those similar situations to what we talked about last night with the Chiefs, how it's going to be you take your shot on one of these wide receivers, whether it be Christian Watson or whether it be an Allen Lazard. I think you take your shot with them and hope for the best. And similar to what you said, what Aaron said last night is, I think you will figure out pretty early who is going to be the guy for the Green Bay Packers moving forward. Now, I will say this is definitely one of those training camps you are going to want to watch for, and really keep an eye on, your fantasy season. People out there who may be new to fantasy or maybe not as experienced as others, your fantasy season starts in training camp, watching how things go, getting you ready for your drafts. Obviously, your drafts should not start until the end of preseason. Training camp is where you need to start doing your research. And in this situation, see who Aaron Rodgers is favoring more throughout camp and throughout preseason. And maybe that's not where you put all of your stock, but that will help you a lot when trying to decide whether you're going to draft an Allen Lazard or a Christian Watson. Aaron, what do you think about the wide receivers in Green Bay?
I like the ranking. I'm not sold on Allen Lazard being a lead guy. I honestly think him and Christian Watson probably have similar numbers this year. But I think Christian Watson's going to emerge towards the end of the year when it really kind of kicks in, matters most. but I think it's safe to say Allen Lazard is the guy to start the year. I am not a believer in Randall Cobb. I don't think he has an impact whatsoever. I would put Amon-Ra Rodgers over him. I'd put Romeo Doubs over him. I'd put Sammy Watkins over him if he makes the roster. The only opposite thing I would say is if Sammy Watkins does make this roster, he's going to play a factor until he gets hurt. He is going to be a guy that when he is on the field, he will be probably the guy, but he's probably going to get hurt. So it's hard to trust. He's the most talented wide receiver there with the most experience. And when people forget how good Sammy Watkins actually is because he's never able to stay on the field. But I firmly believe when Sammy Watkins is healthy and playing, that's a guy that's going to make a difference. He's just never been healthy. And unfortunately, and even if it's not like missing games type, not being healthy, it's like lingering issues type health stuff. So I think you'll see him make an impact the first few games, get hurt, and then go into oblivion if he makes the team.
Waiver.
But see, that says to me that he's always going to have those lingering issues. Then, I mean, 3 of the last 4 years he's played 9 games, and even the year he played the 13 in Kansas City, 673 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, he's only had one 1,000-yard season in his entire career, and I know we talked about injury and everything like that.
Understand those offenses, though. You got to understand the fact that playing in Kansas City, he was buying Kelsey and Hill. He was never going to have breakout years in Kansas City. Played in Baltimore, where they didn't throw the ball a whole lot. So outside of really when he has time with the Rams for that 1 year that he just did not play well, it was really about Buffalo. And Buffalo, he was hurt towards the end of that time. His first 2 years, he was right around 1,000 yards. He played well with Tyrod Taylor. He leaves Buffalo after only playing 8 games. He goes to the Rams. He has like a 50% catch rate. It's like, I forgot who his quarterback was at the time, but it wasn't somebody good. And so, no, Jared Goff wasn't the quarterback then.
2016? Sorry,
maybe
17.
It was.
17. Yeah.
Maybe it was. I mean, that explains it. But,
on the Google, it's okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, 50% catch rate he had 70 targets, only caught 39 balls. Tells me a lot there. And then you go to the situations where they had established guys. They had guys they already wanted to get involved in the offense, and he kept getting banged up, right? So it didn't help him. And again, I'm not trying to be the Sammy Watkins advocate here because he's been in the league 8-9 years and nothing's happened. I'm just saying the talent level was never a question with him. It's always been about, hey, can you stay on the field? And I don't think it's going to happen. But for 3 weeks of this year, if he's on that roster that first 3 weeks, watch. Sammy Watkins will be the guy with 112 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Oh, that's him.
You know what I mean?
Right there. That first 3 weeks, I'll tell you what, don't draft Sammy. He'll be there on your waiver. Grab him week 1, roll him out for 3 weeks, and then you're probably trade him. Screw somebody over on the rest of your league. Because that's clutch time for him.
Is this the best situation Sammy Watkins has been in his entire career throughout? I mean,
Buffalo.
That's what kills me about it. Like, honestly, I would say Buffalo probably was his worst at this point now. But since then, I mean, the Rams, the first time that, well, I mean, he was rocking with EJ Manuel.
I would say it's Buffalo.
Was the best?
Because he was the number one guy. Those other places, even though you're playing with great quarterbacks, Baltimore doesn't really produce. They had Hollywood Brown. They don't produce high-level wide receiver fantasy assets. Kansas City already produced Tyreek Hill. We've seen their number 2 usually doesn't produce high-level fantasy assets. So when you're talking fantasy situation, when you're the guy, that's the best situation you've been in. And that was in Buffalo when he produced his highest fantasy value.
That was before we were talking about good Buffalo, though. That was wishy-washy Buffalo. I know.
I mean, in fantasy, it doesn't matter.
I know what you're saying. I'm just like looking at it, and I'm just, oof.
Let's go on to the running back position here real quick before we move on to the Vikings. AJ Dillon, we've mentioned how I feel like as we progress through this fantasy season, we're starting to everyone on the show. I feel like Aaron, you have, I feel like AJ, you have, I know I have, starting to get more and more liking AJ Dillon's value and AJ Dillon, the player heading into the 2022 season. Is AJ Dillon an RB2 this season in fantasy football? Layup, someone slam dunk at home.
Yes, the easy answer is yes. They're going to rely heavily on both those backs. And with the amount of touches that they're both going to see, Aaron Jones more so in the passing game likely, he's going to score a ton of touchdowns. Green Bay is still a very, very good football team. They're going to win a lot of games still, despite missing Davante Adams. I know that's a huge name, but it's just a receiver. I shouldn't say it's just a receiver. It's an outside weapon that a team like Green Bay can withstand losing, and they're still going to win games. So, yeah, I think A.J. Dillon is a slam dunk RB2. I have him probably in the middle of that RB2 pack with the potential of being a high-end RB2. If, for whatever reason, Aaron Jones does lose more carries than I think, and he strictly becomes that kind of out-of-the-backfield passing threat, A.J. Dillon is going to be a factor, and I'm not opposed. Right now, you look at those backs, and we talk about it all the time. Zeke and Tony Pollard, Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. If I'm picking one backfield that I said I had to have two backs in, and I don't like doing it, but if I had to have both of them, I would take Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon as the guys that I'm taking both of them in and playing them every week. That's how I feel.
I agree. I think with that situation what you have in Green Bay, that's the best situation to where you're going to have both running backs be as productive. And we've talked about it, and AJ, you even joked around about this before when we were talking about ranking the wide receivers. Joked around about saying, can we rank AJ Dillon or Aaron Jones as the number one wide receiver? And we've talked about it on the show plenty of times. We actually think that's what's going to end up happening in Green Bay, in turn making A.J. Dillon a very valuable asset in the rushing attack at the goal line for this Green Bay Packers team who is going to be scoring points. A.J. Dillon he's being drafted right now not as an RB1 or not as an RB2. He's just outside. His ADP has him as the RB26 behind guys like Clyde, who we talked about yesterday, who I'm pretty sure all of us have A.J. Dillon over. He's getting drafted behind Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, Elijah Mitchell, J.K. Dobbins. I think you'd have an argument for A.J. Dillon against most of those guys, I'd say. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I'd take him over all of those guys, to be honest, except maybe Elijah Mitchell.
Okay. Yeah.
Definitely over Clyde, Breece, and Etienne.
And then there's Antonio Gibson. That might be.
I'm not taking him over Gibson. Yeah. I would take him over J.K. Dobbins, though.
Yeah. So that's right around that. That's right around that RB20 range for A.J. Dillon, and that's what we're talking about with the ceiling of possibly being a high end RB2, like you said, Aaron. So he might be your steal, one of the steals of the draft, drafting A.J. Dillon. Let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings in 2022. Their fantasy outlook. Aaron, we'll start with you here. Dalvin Cook. The more I did research on how I wanted to present this show tonight about the Minnesota Vikings fantasy outlook, I started seeing a lot more about Dalvin Cook and people being concerned about this Minnesota Vikings offense moving towards a pass-first style of offense and that hurting Dalvin Cook's value. Last season, we saw him regress from the prior season. He was RB2 in 2020. He finishes as RB16 in 2021, with the Minnesota Vikings passing even more last year and potentially passing even more this year. So let's figure this one out here. Does the Minnesota Vikings offense being more pass first hurt or help Dalvin Cook?
It's a loaded question. I don't think it does anything.
Bang, bang.
I don't think it does anything. I don't think Dalvin Cook's value is impacted whether they decide to throw the ball a little bit more, run the ball a little bit more. Dalvin Cook is a top fantasy guy because he's a guy who can carry a workload and can work in and out of the backfield. He's going to catch passes. What are you going to throw to Alexander Madison over Dalvin Cook? No, he's going to be on the field 3 downs, and they're going to make sure they get the ball in his hands because he's one of the most dangerous weapons in the NFL. So he is going to touch the ball, whether that's in the air, whether that's on the ground, whether that's with a revert. I really don't give a hoot. Like, at the end of the day, he's going to be upwards of around 300 touches, and he's going to produce. Last year, the reason his numbers dropped off didn't have anything to do with passing the ball more or running the ball more, because he had the same amount of carries he did 2 years ago when he was the number 6 running back. It was about his touchdowns regressed. They didn't score as much on the ground, which hurt him big time, because the years prior he had 16 and 13 touchdowns. Last year he only had 6. So you want to talk about regression. It's the regression of the scoring that really made him drop off significantly. And not to mention, he missed 3 games last year, or 4 games last year. The prior years, he had only missed 2 each of those past 2 seasons. So I don't worry about Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook is a good running back. He's young still. He's 26. He'll be an RB1. And if in a bad year, what would be considered a bad year because you drafted him as a first-round pick, Dalvin Cook was the RB16, missing 4 games, scoring 6 touchdowns. So it's hard to be like, oh no, I'm worried about Dalvin Cook. I don't care who the offensive coordinator is. That's their horse. They're going to give him the ball.
Yeah. And you might have some really good value with, like, obviously we're talking about first round picks, and it's a little much to say you're getting value out of a first round pick, because you're paying a lot, but he's going at the back end of the first round right now. He's going in around the 8th to 10th pick in fantasy leagues right now. I mean, that could be a steal for a guy like Dalvin Cook, who we're kind of used to seeing be a top 5 player being drafted in fantasy leagues.
Like, Derrick Henry is going as RB 3 or 4, often injury as well, way more work, like a huge volume workload in an offense that's, let's be honest, it's not very good. They are run heavy though. And I don't see how that value is equivalent to a Dalvin Cook, who gets work out of the passing game, which Derrick Henry does not. So, like, the same concerns you would give me about Dalvin Cook, the injury, the I don't know, maybe lack of usage or over usage in previous years, I would have those same concerns about a Derrick Henry who doesn't get any work out of the backfield. So I don't know that I'm concerned so much with where Dalvin Cook's offense is headed, more so than just him being on the field itself.
You're scared. You scaring me, to be honest. Why? I'm going to just say it right here.
Why?
It's not really like scaring me. Like, you have had so much, and I've been on board with this. I really am on board with this. I'm feeling it as well. The slander towards Derrick Henry of having the off year, and it is all valid points. You have not presented anything that's not valid when bringing down Derrick Henry. But laugh at me all you want. I watched the Derrick Henry workout videos that they post on social media. I'm like, dude, this dude's going to be a freaking beast again. Like, and that's just what I see. And I'm like, dude, like, cause you were talking about the injury and like he's a big dude and all the pressure he's going to have on his ankle and all that. And it's just, Derrick Henry is a freak, man.
Do you remember when Le'Veon Bell came back in the league and he had those workout videos and everybody was like, oh shit, yeah, LVB is back. Look at him. He looks in great shape. Look at him running up those hills. Bruh. It's different when you got 11 guys trying to come tackle you. And this is not about Derrick Henry. I mean, he is, and I'm not saying he's not going to be good, but we're talking RB3 versus RB8 at Dalvin Cook. And I'm like, okay, give me the younger guy who's more versatile, who can catch out of the backfield in a better offense as the workhorse versus a guy that's all the attention, a huge volume over the past 2 years, coming off injury as well on a not so good offense and no passing down work. I'm probably leaning Dalvin Cook every time. Does that mean Derrick Henry's not going to be an RB1? No. But is it going to be RB number 3? I don't think so. I'm sorry. Last year, the year before that, those were unreal years. It's hard to duplicate that. We've seen this, Saquon Barkley. We've seen it, Ezekiel Elliott, for 2 years. We've seen years like this before where you have a couple of oh my God years and then you fall back to earth. And Derrick Henry rushes for 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. Great year. Nobody's knocking that. But are you getting RB3 or total RB number 3 out of that? Probably not if you're not getting any passing down work.
Derrick Henry about to rush for 1,700 yards and 16 touchdowns this season. And
Tennessee will be lucky to score 16 touchdowns this year.
As a team. The disrespect is real.
Let's make sure you put this in all the Titans pages.
We're definitely going to talk more about Derrick Henry when we get to our Titans and our AFC South fantasy outlook. But AJ, one last question on the Vikings before we go to the Bears. Adam Thielen, last year, I know Justin Jefferson's the hot name, and it's obvious where Justin Jefferson is getting drafted. He should be. He is that damn good. But Adam Thielen has been there, and he has been just I don't know, it's almost say the backbone of this Minnesota Vikings team, the heart and soul of this Minnesota Vikings team. He's been very consistent in fantasy football, maybe not producing the best of numbers like the wide receiver 1 numbers, but he's always consistently around that wide receiver 2 range. Right now he's being drafted as the wide receiver 30. Do you think he outperforms that ADP value of wide receiver 30 this season?
I do. Not by a bunch, but I definitely think he can be ahead of wide receiver 30. This is a guy who played very, very well in that offense and has been very reliable in that offense. Even coming off a season-ending ankle surgery last year, he posted back-to-back seasons with double-digit touchdowns. And that was with the defensive-minded coach. Now you got Kevin O'Connell coming in from the Rams and from Sean McVay, and a guy who likes to lean on some veterans to make sure this offense moves, at least in the beginning of the season. I think he's going to lean a little bit on Adam Thielen to make sure that Justin Jefferson can still operate on the other side, because you can't just forget about him. You can mention he's a little bit another year older and whatnot, but one of the best things that Adam Thielen does is operate around the red zone. And being a year older doesn't mean you have to be just as quick off the line in the red zone, but you can still be as physical as he used to be to get that separation that you've seen him get in the red zone. So even if he's not the guy who's getting 8, 9, 10 catches a game, if he's getting 2 touchdowns because he's just making red zone catches and things of that nature, I feel pretty comfortable having an Adam Thielen as a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 3. That sounds like something that I can get behind. So I think this season he will surpass wide receiver 30, and you'll be happy with where you get him if you're drafting him around that area.
So you'd be okay if Adam Thielen was your wide receiver 2?
Well, wide receiver 3. I would be, though. If he's a low-end wide receiver 2, I'm okay with that too. But that also means at that point in time, 1, I've probably got pretty decent running backs.
Yeah,
and 2, wide receiver is so deep. It's just so deep. The amount of guys that I can stack up on if I'm stuck at Adam Thielen as my wide receiver 2. I'm probably going to take a small run on wide receivers and some dart throws and guys that I believe in has a shot at a good season.
Yeah, I don't think there's a shot in hell Adam Thielen's a wide receiver 2. I don't think he's going to get enough yardage and volume to do that. You mentioned the touchdowns. That's where his value is going to be. It's going to continue to be there. I think he'll see very similar numbers to what we've seen before. It'll be 900 yards, double-digit touchdowns, something along the lines of, I don't know how many catches he's had over the past couple of seasons, but 60, 70 catches. I think that's where you're going to get Adam Thielen. I'm looking at Adam Thielen more like a wide receiver 3, throw into your flex option. The wide receiver position is just too deep. I need more upside from my wide receiver 2. I want my wide receiver 2 to have the ability to crack that wide receiver 1 on a good year, not my wide receiver 2 cracking the wide receiver 2. Because that's what we're hoping Adam Thielen gets, is into the top 24. We're not expecting Adam Thielen to get into the top 15. And I think as a wide receiver 2, I'm looking for a guy that has the potential to do that. And I don't know that Adam Thielen does this point in his career, but don't get me wrong. Adam Thielen's a solid fantasy option. Very, very solid fantasy value. And if you're getting him, I would imagine he's probably going 8th round, 7th, 8th round.
He is going 72. So that's what, 12, 24. That's about like God. Math.
That's the end of the 6th round. So that might be a little bit high for me. But the 7th, 8th round, I'm okay. I'm okay taking him there, because that means you probably got, if you did normal draft strategy, you probably got 2 backs. You probably got 2 wide receivers. You got either a quarterback or a tight end. And now you're going for these deeper positions. So I'm okay with that there.
I think too with Adam Thielen is he allows you to be a little bit more risky with some of your other picks, because Adam Thielen isn't gonna, unless he gets hurt, he's not going to ever really screw you over. He's never. I don't think you'll look at Adam Thielen and he'll goose you. I don't think you'll get one of those type of games or those type of games from Adam Thielen. But you're just not, like you said, Aaron, you're just not going to get that high end type of ceiling from an Adam Thielen, but you will get that consistency. And I think that wide receiver 30 spot, maybe I boost him up a little bit higher, high end wide receiver 3. Maybe you're looking at wide receiver 27, 26 type of stuff from him, but he's not going to let you down as often as some of these other guys. So you can, when it comes to draft strategy, which is huge, you can draft Adam Thielen as your consistent guy and then take your shots on your riskier. Maybe you go for a Packers wide receiver or a Chiefs wide receiver and you want to take your shot, but you have your safety net in Adam Thielen.
Let me ask you, you love name games. Let me ask you how you would draft. I'm just thinking about guys that could be behind Adam Thielen that we've talked about. Are you taking Adam Thielen? Are you taking? No, I think I got him. Are you taking Adam Thielen or Allen Robinson?
Allen Robinson.
Taking Adam Thielen or DeAndre Hopkins?
Ooh. Probably DeAndre Hopkins. He's going much later. I'd rather that value than Thielen.
Are you taking Adam Thielen or guys like even upside guys like Rashad Bateman, Davante Smith, Gabriel Davis?
Would it be a cop out to just say it depends on how the rest of my draft looks?
No, because that's I think that's your point. I think that's the point is if you've taken 2 good receivers already, you're not going to take Adam Thielen there. You're going to go after the guy that Gabriel Davis, who might end up being a top 15 receiver, or a Davante Smith who might break into the top 20. But you're going to take more risk there if you don't get a receiver early. Say you had the draft strategy of you went running back heavy, then you took a tight end, then you took a quarterback, and then you took a receiver, and now you've come back around and there was a heavy run on receivers, and Adam Thielen's sitting there, or some of these guys that have huge upside, but you're like, I got a lot of risky plays. I need a solid here. Then you're going Adam Thielen. But I imagine that many of us that play fantasy football are going to be passing on an Adam Thielen because we're going after the guys that we feel are going to have breakout years or these bigger years because we know what Adam Thielen's going to give us. That's just what fantasy players do.
Playing it safe is boring, but I'll tell you what, they're like some of these guys, like if I'm looking up way ahead of the draft, and like I said, with like you're drafting a risk wide receiver, I mean, like a DK Metcalf, I'd take an Adam. I would take Adam Thielen at his value or at his ADP if I draft a guy like DK Metcalf, because I don't know what it's going to be like with Geno Smith or Drew Lock. Not to say it's going to be terrible. I'm not saying it's going to be terrible.
You know what it's going to be like.
That is not where you have to feel like you have to apologize. You are well within your right to say that.
That or like a Michael Pittman Jr. or like a DJ Moore or Mike Williams. Like if those guys are on my team and I'm taking a leap of faith on those guys, I would like my Adam Thielen there to be.
I think that's interesting. That's an interesting take because every guy you just mentioned, I don't think that's a leap of faith. Those guys have been good. Maybe Mike Williams
been bad.
No, they haven't.
Well, I mean, DJ Moore has been bad.
DJ Moore's been bad? Well, in what planet? On what planet, in what world has DJ Moore been bad?
Overall, not bad. But in a season, he tends to be fairly inconsistent. You can't tell me last season he was not inconsistent.
Bro, he's finished no worse than wide receiver 23 the last 3 years.
Yes, I get that. Finished, that's fine.
Overall, you sound like dealing with this inconsistent, I never know what I'm going to get. Every single receiver that's outside the top guys, you can say that about. Everyone.
53, half of DJ Moore's games last year, he had less than 8 points.
Yeah.
Only 2 games did he have more than 13 points. He's not doing great, but he can tend to do bad for you.
Can I ask you what the definition of consistency is then? Because if you just said he only had 2 games over 13 points, but he finished the year as wide receiver, whatever it was, 18 with no quarterback play. That is the definition of
53% of his games are technically considered poor.
No. You are defining what is a poor game. What I'm asking you is, how do you finish at wide receiver 18, which is clearly easily a wide receiver 2, and only 2 of your games are considered great games over 13 points? Because to me, that just says, that speaks to the model. He's consistent. You know what he's going to give you every single week.
I don't know if I know what DJ Moore is going to give me every single week, though.
That makes no sense.
When half of your games are bad games, it's
how. Vinny, you don't make sense when you say something like that. When Adam Thielen finishes as wide receiver 28, how does that equate?
I'm not saying I'd rather have Adam Thielen over DJ Moore, though. That's not what I'm saying at all.
I think that's exactly what you said.
No, that is not what I said at all. If I'm drafting DJ Moore, if I'm drafting Mike Williams, if I'm drafting DK Metcalf, I also would like to draft an Adam Thielen later on, because I know he's going to be giving me a more consistent game. Just in case if DJ Moore is starting to shit the bed multiple weeks in a row, I can go and say, okay, I'm replacing DJ Moore with Adam Thielen.
I am calling 100% bullshit on everything you just said, including your numbers you gave for DJ Moore. The Fool started out the season 14 points, 21 points, 20 points, 32 points. Where are you getting these numbers?
Yeah, what were you looking at?
What numbers are you making up?
It's on Fantasy. It's on Fantasy Pros. They have a quality starts list from 2022.
Then you're looking at the wrong stuff, because the fact of the matter is, in PPR leagues, his first 5 weeks of the season, he shattered 13 points. So
then he has your games, 3 straight games of 6 points, 7 points, 9 points, 9 points.
What
are you looking
in
standard?
At?
You're looking in standard, aren't you?
You're looking at standard leagues, fool. He had 9 points, 12 points.
I'm looking at the rough cut league from last year.
You are looking at something completely off, bro.
I'm also looking at the rough cut from last year. 15.4 week 1, 21.9 week 2, 20.5 week 3, 31.9 week 4. Then he had a string of bad games when you go 8.8, 9.9, back up to 13.
That's what I'm saying. He had a string of some bad games.
If your definition of a bad game is 8.8 points in a back-to-back weeks, and that's inconsistency to you, then you're not paying attention to every other wide receiver in the NFL.
Like I said, I'm not saying I'm not drafting DJ Moore, and I'm not saying that I would draft Adam Thielen over DLA. What?
You're calling him risky. And I'm saying, how did you name those guys specifically, calling them risky, when every player that you could name between wide receiver 11, 12, all the way for the rest of all the wide receivers have those games? But we wouldn't call those inconsistent?
Realistically, everyone from wide receiver 15, other than Brandon Cooks, who somehow does it every year where he's just Mr. Consistency, everybody from wide receiver 15 on, it is fair to say they are riskier picks. And that's what I'm trying to say is, if you take a guy who is, I think DJ Moore is a risky play.
It's such a misconception though, Vinny. You're doing that, but you bring up guys like Brandon Cooks and it's wrong. Brandon Cooks had 3 for 28, 2 for 15, 4 for 26, 5 for 24, but we call him consistent. Yeah. You can't be inconsistent in calling these guys inconsistent. It has to be across the board. Brandon Cooks is just as inconsistent as DK Metcalf, who's just as inconsistent as DJ Moore, who's just as inconsistent as Michael Pittman.
Well, according to the Fantasy Pros consistency chart, DJ Moore has 9 poor starts 53% of the time, and Brandon Cooks is at 44%. So,
what is considered a poor start on there?
Less than 8 points.
All right. I can't do the.
I'm gonna send you this link in our chat.
I don't want it, because if you're looking at that, you're probably losing fantasy leagues right now by passing.
I don't win often, so that's just how it works. So
no, I don't mean you specifically. I just mean in general.
I'll say you specifically.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, that's fine. That's fine. I don't win often anyway, so
My point is just that all of those guys have inconsistent games throughout the season. At times, it becomes more glaring when a DJ Moore might do it for 3 or 4 straight games, and you get so frustrated with that. That's how fantasy players react.
Yeah.
But Brandon Cook's having 5 throughout the season, one here, one there, one there. Nobody pays attention to it. That's the difference.
There was,
but that's the big thing though, because the thing that you can talk about finishing wide receiver 18 and everything, but like fantasy football is a weekly game played over the course of a season, and having 3 bad weeks in a row can be detrimental to your entirety of the season. Losing those weeks upset people more than the times that they were good when it was too late. Those are the things that people remember. That's why you hear people say Dalvin Cook's injury prone, because they remember the 3 weeks where it mattered most. Like,
tell me where it matters most. If you said DJ Moore in the playoffs, fantasy playoffs for the past 2 years has produced no double-digit games, we might be able to have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Because that's when it quote unquote matters. But just to say throughout the course of the year, week 4, 5, 6, he shit the bed. Okay, well, week 1 through 5, he won you 5 weeks in a row. So I can't weigh those more than I'm weighing weeks 1 through 5.
Was there not a time last year where we did have conversations of whether or not you should be trying to trade DJ Moore away?
Absolutely. Every player has a price and can be traded for the right value if somebody's going to pay you. But I'm not trading DJ Moore to get rid of him to say I don't want him on my team. But if somebody's going to pay you top end wide receiver 2 value for a player that could potentially be higher than that, then you take it for maybe a safer play and a wide receiver 2 or something like that. Every player has a value, as we've seen AJ trade for Jonathan Taylor, Cooper Kupp, whatever it is. Every single player can be traded in fantasy football. It's about the value you get in return.
Oh man, what a dumb trade! Oh, gracious, what a dumb, stupid trade.
Well, all right, Bailey won the league.
Yeah, I know. Right. Oh god, I can't.
Everything I got back, and it still didn't work out in my favor.
This fool really posted the link in the chat. Like I'm gonna go click on that motherfucker.
Well, I did just so you can see. Tell me where I am wrong.
I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong because Fantasy Pros put numbers out there. What I'm saying is the reasoning behind saying like, hey, those are risky plays by saying, well, 50% of his games. If you said that same number, but say it was the first 6 weeks of the year. First 7 weeks of the year, DJ Moore sucked. And then weeks 8 through 16, he went off. Guess what we would be doing? I'd be sitting here arguing with you guys. He's not Rashad Penny. He didn't go off in the play, like that kind of stuff, right? Because you wouldn't have cared about the first 6 weeks.
Can you repeat that? So the first 6 weeks he sucks.
Say he sucks. Say he only got 8, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4. And then the end of the season, it was 25, 32, 18, well, I mean, it wouldn't, 21.
It won't matter. It won't matter if I start 0-6 because DJ Moore shit the bed.
No. You're right. You're right. That's my point. You didn't want to count weeks 1 through 5, but that chart doesn't say what weeks those are. That chart doesn't say, oh, it was only weeks 1 through 6 where he sucked. It just says 50% of the time. That could have been weeks 1 through 8.
It's just, hey, that's fair. That's fair.
I remember when we were talking about Adam Thielen.
Yeah, I was about to say we just spent quite a while about that.
That's about the value really of a player and where they're drafted. Yeah. And I get what Vinny's saying. Yeah. The guys he feels more risky. He feels a little bit safer with Adam Thielen, which is completely fair, unless Adam Thielen's touchdowns regress significantly, because then he would be a shitburger.
And that's a possibility as well. That is a possibility as well. And by no means was I trying to take shots at any of those wide receivers. DJ Moore included.
I mean, you kind of were. But
You know what? F DJ Moore, okay? F the Panthers. DJ Moore will finish as a wide receiver 3 this season. Book it, just like Sam Darnold was supposed to finish as a top 10 quarterback last year.
Bro's been a wide receiver 2 with the worst quarterbacks anybody's ever seen.
I am aware. All right, let's go on to our final 2 teams. Let's go to the Bears here real quick. There's not much to talk about with the Chicago Bears in terms of fantasy, unless you're very excited to steal Velus Jones with your last pick in your fantasy draft in 75 rounds, and with the 756th pick in the draft, you take Velus Jones in your fantasy football league, then it's okay. Okay. All right. Enough of that nonsense. Justin Fields. Justin Fields last season at times was a QB1. His last 4 games where he finished the game, his last 4 games of the season that he played, where he finished from start to finish, he finished as a quarterback 1, a top 10 quarterback in all of those games. Can Justin Fields sneak in to the top 12 quarterbacks at the end of the season, Aaron?
I'm kind of confused at what you said. You said he was a quarterback 1 last year?
No, that's not what I said. That is not what I said at all.
Okay,
his last 4 games of the season where he played from start to finish, he finished as a QB1 in the top 10 of fantasy football. Okay. Some games he was at 5.
Some games he was at 9. What? Look, man, I don't like that you went to Full Sail University and you were pulling these skewed stats out of your ass because it's absolutely asinine. You would even ask that question in that way. The man played 4 games the last 8 weeks of the year. And one game he left, which we don't count because he got hurt.
But we talk about it all the time. We talk about it all the damn time about how Derek Carr is not going to be. You can't see Derek Carr being a top 12 quarterback, or you can't see him getting into the top 10 because of his rushing ability, his lack of rushing ability. Yeah. Justin Fields has that rushing ability, we saw it last season where he did finish in the top 10 of quarterbacks because of that rushing ability. So it's not that insane to ask that type of question.
Yes, it's the way you worded it. First of all, it is very insane that you would say that because you failed to mention in those 4 games that you're talking about, 2 of those games he ran for like 45 yards and 35 yards. The rushing ability didn't really do as much as we expected to. The second thing is we shouldn't be talking about Justin Fields quarterback 1 in any conversation. Because we should be talking about Justin Fields. Is he fantasy relevant right now? Like, that's the question. It's not, is he a quarterback 1? Is he fantasy relevant? Is Justin Fields even worth drafting? That's the real question. In a redraft league, are you drafting Justin Fields? I'll tell you this right now. Most people aren't. As a backup, maybe. Most people are streaming him. And that's the real question. Look, upside, dynasty, future, keeper, absolutely. Justin Fields has the potential to crack the top 10, to be a fantasy asset in the top 10. In 2022, with that roster, I ain't looking for Justin Fields to be on my team. And that's a damn shame because the ability's there. And to your point, there will be games where he rushes for 2 touchdowns, throws for 200 yards, and throws for another one, and does put up those numbers. But guess what? I'm not going to be the person that picks him up and starts him the week he throws for 42 yards, is sacked 12 times, fumbles twice, and throws 3 picks. Not happening.
I can see it now, though, when I hop in the boat with AJ for a streaming quarter. Oh, no, that's streaming defense. When we talk about streaming quarterbacks of the week during our fantasy football shows, I can see Justin Fields coming up in conversation as one of those quarterbacks that we try to stream. Sure. And that's fair. That's fair to say. AJ, with the Bears offense as a whole, you really look at 2 people that are actually going to be drafted from this. Maybe Cole Kmet gets drafted too. Shouldn't shit on him. But the 2 main people, Darnell Mooney and David Montgomery. Darnell Mooney is being drafted right now as the wide receiver 25. David Montgomery is now being drafted as the running back 15. What is the overall comfort level in drafting those 2 guys at their ADP, knowing what this Chicago Bears offense has looked like in the past?
Comfort is a tough word. I feel like that's a very strong word, the trust level there. But the thing you can bank on is if you ended up drafting these guys is the workload. David Montgomery is going to get run. But even with that being said, let's see, he finished as the running back 19 last year. He had that great year the year before where he finished as the running back 4. And then the year before that, I want to say he was the running back 24. So you're getting RB2 session, but like there's people around him that I think I would rather. I think that Elijah Mitchell's going after him. We talked about AJ Dillon, who I think I might take the upside of and expecting him to have a great year. Darnell Mooney is going to get the targets. I'm excited about the possibility of Darnell Mooney. I mean, he had 140 targets last season. So you think that comes down a little bit maybe? If we're talking 115, 120, he can still be efficient with that. He's a real deep threat. He's a speedster. But if he's the only person you're worried about stopping, is he going to be able to be effective? So I don't know if the word comfort is there. At pick 30 for David Montgomery, I might try to go with some more upside. In other years where there's more options, you were a little bit more expecting of a better offense, I might have taken it. This year, I might look for another guy. Darnell Mooney, because he's a wide receiver 1, and he's still going at our wide receiver 3, technically the first wide receiver 3 at this point in time. I think he'd also have to fall to me. I just think there's other guys that I would rather take a stab on than go with the consistency level of what we were hoping from what we saw last season and with David Montgomery the season before. So,
see, it's
funny. And I mean, that's just personal, I guess. So,
yeah, no, I'm honestly, I'm on board with that. And then that's something where it's like this. It's hard to draft those players that are on such bad offenses, but with David Montgomery, it's the workload that he's going to get. That's the thing that makes me a little bit more comfortable. If I had to choose between whether or not I'm more comfortable with Darnell Mooney or whether or not I'm more comfortable with David Montgomery and selecting them in the draft, if I could only have one of them, I'd much rather take David Montgomery at his ADP than a Darnell Mooney, even though Darnell Mooney, like you said, is being drafted as a wide receiver 3 right now, high end, the highest of wide receiver 3s right now. I still would rather David Montgomery because you know he's going to get the workload. Like that is there. The targets for Darnell Mooney are going to be there, but if Justin Fields can't even get the ball off or can't even make the throw, it's not going to matter if he's targeting Darnell Mooney or not because it's not going to get there or it's going to be picked off on the way there or whatever. David Montgomery is going to be carrying the rock for Chicago. Bad offensive line or not, you said last year he finished top 20 as a top 20 running back last year. I think that's right around where what you're going to get out of David Montgomery. Aaron, are you there or are you?
I really want to answer this question.
Yes, you're there. You're good.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Darnell Mooney, whatever. I don't care about him. David Montgomery, give me all the shares. Every share of David Montgomery I can get. Give them to me. You mentioned volume. It's really about the volume. There was a stretch last year, I think like the last 5 or 6 weeks of the year, maybe even last 7 weeks of the year, 9 targets, 7 targets, 6 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, 5 targets, like just insane volume in the pass game, in the run game. Give me all the David Montgomery. He missed 4 games last year and was still RB19. I think his floor is an RB2, mid RB2 like last year. Health-wise, he's easily take him as your RB2 and feel very, very, very good about it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think I'm just more worried this season than I've ever been for them. Like, because you're absolutely right, and I'm put it this way: I'm deciding with all of that knowledge to take a stab somewhere else, just because I don't know that it'll work in my favor this season. And I've had David Montgomery on most of my teams for the last 3 years, and yes, it has worked well for me. There's sometimes where it's just like you have to sit there on your draft board and make that choice. And I think where I'm sitting right now until I see something that gives me back that hope, maybe this preseason, the offense looks way better and way more efficient than we ever thought it could be. And maybe then I'm like, all right, maybe I'll just, maybe 1 share and we'll see what happens. And then I'll trade for him later. But I think I'm just more worried this season than I was last year or the year before. On a David Montgomery. Like, even if he said running back 18, I'd probably be like, yeah. I mean, I grab him right there. Like, and it's 3 spots, but I mean, that could be the 2 or 3 players that before that could be the difference in, me making the playoffs or me missing the playoffs.
Yeah. And the players going around David Montgomery, we had, it's funny, we all, I think, if I remember correctly in our tiers show, we had David Montgomery ranked and agreed on David Montgomery being an RB2. He's being drafted ahead of James Conner, who we did have as an RB1 on our tiers show. So he's being drafted literally one spot ahead of James Conner. So that's one player that I think I'd rather have. Man, James Conner in that offense it can be good too. It's tough. It's tough to gauge this Bears fantasy outlook because of how bad this team could potentially be. Watch them be a surprise, and Velus Jones finishes as a wide receiver too. We're talking about him on a waiver wire show or something like that during the regular season. Let's finish it off here while Aaron is ice for. I think Aaron is still there. He's just on the audio only at this point because he's frozen. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you guys. My video is just not connecting well, but I don't want to touch anything because at least you can hear me.
Yeah,
right.
That's fair.
Yeah, it looks like you got a profile pickup. You know, it works.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Let's finish it off here with the Detroit Lions. And I started the show talking about tight ends, and now we're going to finish the show talking about tight ends. Is TJ Hawkinson worth it in the 5th round, Aaron?
Come on, I'm tired of talking about tight ends. Go to somebody else with tight ends. TJ Hawkinson, no. I'm done with TJ Hawkinson that early. The fact of the matter is last year I was so excited about TJ Hawkinson, and he let me down. It wasn't that he wasn't good enough or he didn't have good moments, but he just wasn't. He didn't crack that top tight end tier like I thought he was going to. So I'm kind of souring on TJ Hawkinson. I will come back to him if I can get him a good enough value, but I'm staying away that early. I'm not taking tight ends in the first 5 rounds unless it's Travis Kelce, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Mark Andrews. That's it.
I think I agree. And it's funny, the face that he froze on, that's the face that you would freeze on with talking about being disgusted with taking TJ Hawkinson in the 5th round. AJ, are you on board with that?
Yeah, I think he's in that on the other side of that gap. You know when you have to stop on the tight ends and have to get other players. And I think TJ Hawkinson falls just on the other side. I mean, just for perspective, last year in our Sherm League, we were looking at TJ Hawkinson and we watched that man drop to like the 11th or 12th round. And we were like,
and then we took him
not anymore. And so, I mean, why would I jump to the 5th round after last season? Sure, he was on pace to do well, but he never got there. So, yeah, I'll definitely wait on that.
The tight end position is legit that position where you have that top that tier drop after Darren Waller. It's like, okay, it's Andrews, Kittle, Pitts, Kelce, and then that's it. Then you can wait, and it's okay taking one super late. For Aaron's sake,
hate me for this. Real quick question then: where do you put Tyler Higbee on this upcoming season? I've heard a lot of talk about him and moving forward with the offense.
I don't draft Tyler Higbee. I would draft Irv Smith Jr. before I draft Tyler Higbee, I think. And that's just me talking out of my ass because I don't know what I'm talking about right now. But on the surface, without looking into anything, I think I would draft Irv Smith before drafting a Tyler Higbee. And I mean, I'd rather the Muth. I'd rather Albert O. I think that's that Aaron loves some Tyler Higbee though.
No. You better be able to me. No.
I don't know if you can see my face, but you love Tyler Higbee. You love Tyler Higbee.
Favorite tight end in the NFL? Okay, I'm just curious.
Okay. Let's, for Aaron's sake, I'll end it with a wide receiver question, just because Amon-Ra St. Brown obviously finished really strong. Oh, look at Aaron. He looks beautiful now. Amon-Ra St. Brown finished the season very strong in fantasy for the Lions with Jared Goff being his quarterback. He's right now being drafted as the wide receiver 26, similar to what we were talking about with Darnell Mooney, who was being drafted as wide receiver 25. Amon-Ra St. Brown's right behind him at wide receiver 26. Do you think he will outperform that high-end wide receiver 3 value that we see him at, AJ?
I think he'll be right in there. He's gonna have to pick up where he left off to be able to fall off and fall into that era, in my perspective. I'm not excited that they added DJ Chark. Don't get me wrong. But I do believe when Jameson Williams gets in there, he's going to be dynamic. I don't think he's going to immediately take over. But I do see his game, his speed, the way he plays translating to the NFL and to this offense. And yes, Jared Goff is a not so great number 1 pick overall, but he is still a veteran quarterback. And Amon-Ra St. Brown did do this with Jared Goff last season. So I think he's talented, but I mean, it depends on how this offense clicks and if they can keep doing that consistently through the season. But I think he still falls into that high-end wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I think I'm in on this area for Amon-Ra St. Brown, right, of like a high end or a very low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 value. Aaron, are you on board with that? No.
I don't think there's a chance in hell Amon-Ra St. Brown cracks a wide receiver 2 this year. With the additions that Detroit made, the running game being, I think, more impactful this year with DeAndre Swift being healthy, hopefully the whole year. I think people forget just how good Amon-Ra St. Brown, how much volume he got the last 6 weeks of the year. This dude was seeing 12 targets a game the last 7 weeks of the year. Not going to happen. That is right. Not sustainable throughout the entire year for me. I do anticipate Jameson Williams at some point to come in and play a role. Doesn't mean I think he's going to overtake Amon-Ra as some guy, but I just think the ball gets spread out a little bit more this year. I don't think down the stretch we saw something very weird. They were almost making a point to give Amon-Ra the ball every play. Like it was like on offense, like, oh, let's throw a 2-yard pass to Amon-Ra and let him run. Like I think it was more to get him comfortable, get him confident to go forward and being a good player. I think he's going to be a good player. I don't think he has as much fantasy success as he did last year. I look at him as a wide receiver 3, like flex ops. We're probably going to play him every week just because of the upside that he has. Yeah. But it's still Detroit. He scored 5 touchdowns in his last 6 games. Probably not sustainable in Detroit. I'm sorry. That's a huge factor. So there's probably some regression there. But if you balance it out over the course of the season, there were games earlier in the season he was getting 7-8 targets. That's the kind of games I expect from him more often. 6 catches, 70 yards. Maybe he gets into the end zone every once in a while. So wide receiver 3 flex for me. I think going at wide receiver 20, whatever he's going at, I think that's kind of high. I think that's a mindset of, oh shit, we saw this last year at the end of the season. He's going to be something special. I don't know.
It also might be until Jameson Williams gets there. It's Quintez Cephas, Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, and DJ Chark.
Well, that's the thing that kind of makes it different for me for Amon-Ra this year is that he has a little bit more competition. Even if we are not considering DJ Chark as the strongest of players, I do think he comes in and is a target for Jared Goff. I think DJ Chark is good enough to take targets away from Amon-Ra St. Brown. And like you said, last season, Aaron, it almost seemed like they were force feeding him the ball. They were just giving it to him no matter what. He doesn't have just a Quintez Cephas or a Khalif Raymond as his wide receiver 2. He has some competent wide receivers next to him. And obviously when Jameson Williams comes back, it's a different story. But there's much more. I don't think
it's the wide receivers though. There's a direct correlation when DeAndre Swift went out. When DeAndre Swift was in the game, the beginning part of the year, he was seeing 10 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets, 11 targets. He went out and got injured and was never quite healthy. The last 6 weeks of the year, when he went out, you see it. That's when Amon-Ra St. Brown started getting the uptick in targets because he started taking those bubble screens, those out of the backfield plays that they were throwing to DeAndre Swift early in the season. Those were now drawn up for an Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think that's his direct competition because the outside guys is not where Amon-Ra St. Brown was getting his work. It was inside. It was out of the backfield. It was the bubble screens. And I think with DeAndre Swift healthy, I think that's what's going to kind of cap his upside. And then you mentioned a competent receiver in DJ Chark. It's going to be harder for him to get the ball there. Then a Jameson Williams, a TJ Hawkinson that's going to start the year healthy, hopefully stay healthy and take targets away from him. He'll be good. I find it very hard to believe. Maybe he proves me wrong that he has stretches of the season where he's going 7 games like he had the end of last year. Those were insane wide receiver numbers. Like you can look at the best wide receivers in football over the past 20 years. They weren't putting up numbers like that. It was insane.
Adam Thielen or Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I would take Adam Thielen.
I might take Amon-Ra. Man,
Duel.
For first 6 weeks of the season, I mean, he could have himself a little steady stretch there, man. Like, it's possible. Him and DeAndre Swift is that offense, and I mean, they are bringing back an entire healthy offensive line. I mean, Frank Ragnow being out last season was a pretty big deal. Like, that push from him is a little bit different. I mean, you're talking about Panay being a year better in the NFL too. Like,
they've got a top 5 offense in the league, offensive line in the league.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah, no, go that far.
Yeah.
They have a top 5. They have arguably a top 5 offense in the league when everyone is healthy. But good chatter, good talk about the NFC North. We'll be back again tomorrow morning for our final show of the week. Fun and Games Friday, hitting you hard, hitting you fast, hitting you fun. Okay.
Oh.
All right, that's it. That's it, guys.
Tomorrow's Fun and Games Friday, huh?
Tomorrow is Fun and Games Friday, and then next Wednesday will be the AFC South. We'll get to talk about Derrick Henry. We'll get to talk about the Titans. We'll get to talk about the Jaguars, of course. But you're not going to want to be anywhere else but the Sac City Podcast. Follow us on all of our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Sac City Pod. We'll be back again live tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time right here on YouTube for Good Morning Sac City. For your boy AJ Johnson, for my best friend Aaron Mukes, I am me. We will see you tomorrow.
Peace out.
Holla.
We know we were a much better team than we came up and represented ourselves. That's what we call a sack lunch. Nom 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 nom.